Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hi, I'm Oliver.
Hi, I'm Lily.
Welcome to Science in Easy English. How do birds know where to go?
Yeah, that is quite the question today, isn't it?
It really is. And it's funny because Aristotle, who was undeniably a genius, was actually completely baffled by bird migration. I mean, so thoroughly confused that he reached a rather hilarious conclusion about the whole thing.
Oh, right, because he just couldn't fathom that these tiny birds were physically flying across the entire globe, right?
Exactly. He decided that they didn't migrate at all. He legitimately believed that certain species, like summer redstarts, simply shape-shifted into winter robins to survive the cold.
That is amazing, shape-shifting birds. I mean, it makes sense for the time, but yeah.
Right. But today, we're going to prove to you that the reality of how these animals navigate is actually much weirder than shape-shifting.
Oh, absolutely. It really is.
We're pulling from a fascinating stack of sources for this deep dive, including articles from The Guardian, recent scientific breakthroughs in quantum biology, and some wild research straight out of the University of Oldenburg.
Yeah, it's a really great mix of material.
So our mission today is to decode the hidden navigational systems of migratory birds. And by the end of this deep dive, you will never look at a flock passing overhead the same way again. Because, as we'll explain, you'll realize that these tiny creatures are basically operating as flying quantum computers.
Which just sounds like science fiction, but it's real. And, the sheer scale of what these animals accomplish really does challenge human logic, which is exactly why ancient thinkers like Aristotle struggled with it so much.
Totally. It's hard to wrap your head around.
Take a bird like the Arctic tern, for example. This is a creature that weighs roughly the same as a tennis ball.
A tennis ball, that's what, like 4 ounces?
Exactly. Super light.
Hmm.
Yet every single year, this tiny bird embarks on a staggering 44,000-mile round trip, migrating all the way from the Arctic to the Antarctic and back again.
That is that is nearly twice the circumference of the entire planet, navigated by an animal that can literally fit right in the palm of your hand.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing.
But before we plunge into the quantum mechanics of how they pull that off, we should probably establish the baseline tools they use. Because scientists have known for a while that birds rely on observable environmental cues, sort of like early human sailors navigating the oceans.
Right. They do rely on an inherited instinct that researchers often call a clock and compass system.
Okay, so how does that work during the day?
Well, during the daytime, birds utilize a time-compensated sun compass. The sun is obviously a great reference point. But because it constantly moves across the sky from east to west, simply flying toward the sun would just send a bird in a massive circle.
Oh, right, because their target is moving.
Exactly. So the bird has to constantly cross-reference the sun's position with its own internal circadian rhythm, its biological clock, to calculate a true heading.
That is incredibly smart.
Yeah, and then when the sun goes down, many night-migrating species will switch over to a stellar compass. They use the stars.
And the way scientists figured out that stellar compass is one of those classic, brilliant pieces of mid-century science. I loved reading about this. In the late 1960s, there was this researcher named Stephen Emlin at Cornell University.
Oh, the planetarium experiment, right.
Yes, he wanted to test how indigo buntings use the night sky. So he built these specialized enclosures, which we now actually call Emlin funnels. They're basically shaped like an inverted cone.
And the bottom has an ink pad, right?
Exactly. An ink pad at the bottom, and the sloped walls are completely lined with paper. So when a bird experiences migratory restlessness, which is that intense biological urge to fly, even when they're kept in captivity, it hops at the side of the funnel.
Leaving behind ink footprints.
Right. Footprints that tell you exactly which direction the bird is trying to travel. So Emlin took these funnels, with the birds inside, and placed them inside a literal planetarium.
Which is such a clever setup. By manipulating the star projector on the ceiling, he could test their reactions in real time.
Yeah, he shifted the constellations to simulate different times of the night, and the birds consistently adjusted their hopping. They were trying to maintain their proper southern migration route.
So they were actively tracking the rotation of the night sky.
They were, and he even went a step further to find out what specifically they were looking at. He started blanking out individual stars on the projector, just turning them off.
Oh, wow. And what happened?
Well, the birds kept their exact heading until Emlyn blocked out the North Star, or Betelgeuse, and its immediate surrounding constellations. The moment he removed the axis point of the sky's rotation, the birds just lost their bearing entirely.
They just started hopping in random directions.
Exactly. They were specifically looking for the visual pivot point of the night sky.
Which demonstrates an incredibly sophisticated level of visual processing and memory for a bird. But, as elegant as the sun and star compasses are, they share a very dangerous vulnerability.
Okay, let's unpack this. If a bird has the sun during the day, the stars at night, and they can clearly recognize geographic landmarks below them, like mountain ranges or coastlines, evolving an entirely separate magnetic compass feels a bit like biological overkill. I mean, why put energy into a redundant system?
Well, it seems redundant until you actually look at the environments these migrations cross. Think about it. A migrating songbird might launch into a non-stop 3-day flight across 1,200 miles of the open ocean, or, the totally featureless expanse of the Sahara Desert.
Ah, right, out there, visual landmarks just do not exist.
Exactly. And if a heavy storm system rolls in, the sun and the stars disappear completely. For a small bird burning through its fat reserves over the ocean, drifting even a few degrees off course means missing landfall entirely.
So they would just run out of energy and drop into the ocean. The margin for error is essentially zero.
Right. To survive those conditions, they require a persistent, infallible grid that functions flawlessly in total darkness and severe weather.
A global grid that doesn't care about cloud cover, the Earth's magnetic field.
Bingo.
But realizing that they use the magnetic field is just the setup. The actual biological mechanism of how a warm, living organism feels a magnetic field takes us straight out of traditional biology and into the realm of quantum physics, deep inside the bird's eye.
Yeah, this brings us to magnetoreception. And for decades, sensory biologists were totally stumped by this. They could easily identify an eye for seeing or an ear for hearing, but nobody knew what a biological magnetic sensor looked like.
It's invisible, basically.
Right. But the leading theory now centers on a highly specialized protein found in the retinas of migratory birds. It's called cryptochrome. Specifically, a variant known as Cryptochrome-4A or Cry4A.
And the sources noted that in night migratory songbirds, like the European robin, the concentration of Cry4A in their eyes spikes dramatically right as the spring and autumn migration seasons begin.
Exactly. And if you look at a non-migratory bird, like a chicken, that spike just doesn't happen.
Which means the robin's protein has been uniquely optimized by evolution specifically for this journey.
Yeah, and the mechanism driving this protein relies on quantum entanglement.
Okay, lay it on me. How does this work?
So when a bird is flying at night, there is always a tiny fraction of ambient blue light available from the stars or the moon. When a photon of that blue light enters the robin's eye and strikes the cryptochrome protein, the energy from that photon literally knocks an electron out of its normal position.
Wow. Just a single photon does that.
Yep. This electron jumps from an amino acid called tryptophan over to a molecule called FAD.
Hold on, those are some dense terms. Let's break down what that actual jump means for the bird.
Sure. So when that electron makes the jump, it leaves behind a molecule with an unpaired electron, and it joins another molecule to create a second unpaired electron. In quantum chemistry, this is called a radical pair.
A radical pair? Okay, I'm with you.
Because these two unpaired electrons were created at the exact same moment from the exact same system, they are quantum entangled. Their quantum spin states are deeply linked, even though they are now separated on different molecules.
Okay, to picture these spin states for you listening, imagine two spinning tops. No matter how far apart you place them, they wobble and spin in perfect, mirrored synchrony. If you tap one, the other reacts instantly.
That's a great way to visualize it. And in the bird's eye, the Earth's invisible magnetic field acts as that tap. The magnetic field subtly alters the wobble, or the spin state, of these entangled electrons.
So the magnetic field is interacting with their quantum states.
Exactly. And that subtle alteration dictates how long the molecules remain in this radical pair state before returning to normal. If the bird turns its head, the alignment of the magnetic field changes, the spin states change, and the chemical output of that cell changes.
And then that chemical reaction dictates how many electrical signals are fired down the optic nerve straight into the bird's brain.
You got it.
So the bird isn't feeling a physical pull toward the North Pole at all. It is processing visual data. I like to think of it like a heads-up display or, an augmented reality filter on your smartphone camera.
Yes, that is exactly what it's like.
As the bird scans the horizon, the quantum reactions in its retinas create a visual overlay. Perhaps it's like a subtle gradient of light and shadow superimposed over the night sky, showing them the exact angle of the magnetic field lines. They are quite literally seeing the magnetic field.
What's fascinating here is that this specific mechanism creates what we call an inclination compass, rather than a standard polarity compass.
Wait, what's the difference? Because a standard scout compass points to the physical poles, right? The needle physically aligns itself to say, this way is north, that way is south.
Right, but the bird's cryptochrome compass doesn't care about north or south. It measures the dip, or the inclination angle of the magnetic field line.
Okay, what does that mean practically?
Well, at the Earth's equator, magnetic field lines run perfectly parallel to the surface of the ground. But as you travel away from the equator and toward the poles, those lines begin to tilt, plunging downward into the Earth. The bird's visual overlay shows them that angle.
Oh, I see.
So instead of north and south, the bird sees poleward, where the lines dip down into the Earth, and equatorward, where the lines flatten out.
That's an entirely different geometric reality to how we see the world. But if we pause for a second, there is actually a massive logical gap here.
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, having a compass that tells you which way you are facing is completely useless if you don't know your current location. If I am dropped blindfolded into the middle of a massive forest and you hand me a compass, I can walk perfectly straight to the north. But I have no idea if walking north takes me toward a highway or hundreds of miles deeper into the wilderness.
Oh, absolutely. A compass only gives you a heading. To know what heading to take, you need a map. The bird needs an internal GPS to complement its quantum AR compass.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting. We have the quantum eye compass, which is the which-way system. But parallel to that, birds possess a where am I system. This magnetic map operates on a completely different biological pathway, relying on microscopic iron-rich crystals called magnetite.
Yeah, and the search for this map actually involves a really fascinating scientific misdirection. For years, researchers found these clusters of iron-rich cells inside the upper beaks of pigeons and other birds.
So they naturally assumed these must be microscopic compass needles pulling on local nerve endings to signal location.
Exactly. We thought the map was in the beak. But advanced single-cell sequencing recently proved those iron-rich cells weren't sensory neurons at all.
Wait, really? What were they?
They are macrophages, immune cells whose job is basically just to clean up and recycle iron from dead red blood cells.
So we were basically looking at the bird's internal trash collectors and mistaking them for a highly advanced GPS unit.
We were. It was a huge red herring in the scientific community. But that error forced researchers to look deeper. And cutting-edge neuromapping has now pointed to a structure deep inside the bird's inner ear called the lagina as the true origin point of the magnetic map.
Wow. Okay, let's explain how ear iron actually translates to a map coordinate. So inside the lagina, these tiny magnetite crystals are attached to mechanically gated ion channels, which sit on the surface of sensory cells.
Right, and when the bird flies through the Earth's magnetic field, the field exerts a microscopic physical torque on the magnetite. It literally physically pulls on the crystal.
And that tiny mechanical tug stretches the cell membrane, popping open the ion channels. Calcium rushes into the cell, which triggers an electrical spike that travels straight down the trigeminal nerve to the brainstem.
Exactly. So while the eye compass is a quantum chemical sensor, the inner ear map is a literal mechanical switch.
Which is just brilliant biological engineering.
It is. And the evidence that this system functions as a true bi-coordinate map was beautifully demonstrated in a recent virtual displacement experiment. This one involved Eurasian reed warblers.
Those are tiny songbirds that migrate massive distances, right?
Yeah, they really are.
Huh.
So researchers in Austria captured a group of these warblers during their autumn migration. They placed them in those Emlyn funnels we talked about earlier, the ones with the scratch paper.
But instead of altering the stars, they surrounded the funnels with magnetic coils.
Exactly. They kept the total magnetic intensity exactly the same so the birds wouldn't panic, but they artificially manipulated the inclination, that dip angle we discussed, and the declination, which is the angle between true geographic north and magnetic north.
And they perfectly tuned those two specific magnetic gradients to simulate the exact magnetic signature of a town called Neftekamsk in Russia,
Yeah.
which is 1,700 miles away from the laboratory in Austria.
Right. And keep in mind, these birds had never been to Russia in their entire lives.
Never. But the second the magnetic field shifted, they instantly changed the direction they were hopping in the funnels. They recognized the new magnetic signature, realized they were supposedly 1,700 miles off their normal migration route, and immediately calculated the exact corrective heading required to get back to their corridor.
It's astonishing. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it proves that these birds are performing complex geospatial trigonometry. They're reading a grid.
Yeah.
By sensing the gradient of inclination across latitudes and the gradient of declination across longitudes, they triangulate their exact coordinates on the globe, all processed within a brain the size of a pea.
So we are essentially looking at a dual system masterpiece. A fragile, quantum-entangled AR display in the eyeball telling them which way they are facing, and a microscopic, iron-based mechanical map in the inner ear telling them exactly where they are.
Both systems tuned to absolute perfection by millions of years of evolution.
Which inevitably brings up a rather troubling modern reality. These finely tuned, deeply sensitive instruments are suddenly trained to function in an environment that we have fundamentally altered. We have saturated the globe with electromagnetic noise.
We really have. Electrosmog.
Electrosmog. It sounds like a sci-fi term, but it's very real.
Exactly. A highly revealing study came out of Henrik Moritson's lab at the University of Oldenburg about this. They were studying European robins going through Zugenruhe, that migratory restlessness.
And they house the birds in wooden huts on the university campus to run orientation tests, right?
Right. But the robins were completely disoriented. They couldn't lock onto a heading at all. They just hopped around randomly, as if the magnetic field had completely vanished.
And the researchers eventually looked at the ambient environment of the wooden huts. The thing is, they weren't next to a massive power plant or a radar dish. They were just exposed to the normal, everyday electronic hum of a modern university campus.
Right. Just weak AM radio frequencies, broadband electromagnetic noise from basic lab equipment, things that are completely harmless to human biology.
But those weak frequencies were the exact resonance needed to interfere with the delicate spin states of the radical pairs in the bird's cryptochrome protein.
Exactly.
Imagine you are standing in a room trying to listen to someone whispering a very complex secret to you from the other side. That whisper is the Earth's magnetic field. Now, imagine someone turns on a television tuned to loud, hissing static.
It's impossible to hear the whisper.
Right. The static isn't going to physically hurt you, but it completely drowns out the whisper. That is what our AM radio waves and electrosmog are doing. They are the static drowning out the magnetic whisper in the bird's eye.
And to test this, the researchers did something remarkably simple. They wrapped the wooden huts in aluminum screens, essentially turning them into Faraday cages that blocked out the surrounding electrosmog.
Wow, and they grounded the screens, right?
Yeah. And the instant the background noise was blocked, the birds' quantum compasses came completely back online. They immediately oriented toward their correct migratory heading.
That's incredible.
They even ran double-blind tests, turning the grounding of the screens on and off without the observing students knowing. And the birds' orientation perfectly matched the presence or absence of the electrosmog.
So, what does this all mean for you, listening to this deep dive right now? It means that our invisible infrastructure, our cell networks, our power grids, our radio broadcasts, is unknowingly throwing a static-filled blanket over the primary sensory network of millions of animals.
Which raises a really important question for modern conservation. Protecting a species is no longer just about preserving a patch of wetland or a forest.
Right, it's about the invisible environment, too.
Exactly. It might require the creation of electromagnetically quiet zones along major migratory flyways, giving these birds spaces where they can recalibrate their quantum compasses without all that human static.
And beyond the vital conservation efforts, the technological implications of how these birds operate are just staggering. Think about your own smartphone. If you open a map app, your phone is pinging massive satellites orbiting the Earth just to figure out what street you're on.
And if you walk under a thick canopy of trees or you're surrounded by tall buildings, you lose the signal entirely.
Yep. Then running that GPS chip drains your phone's battery in a matter of hours.
Meanwhile, the bird is performing flawless global geospatial calculations using literally a few seeds worth of energy.
Exactly. Furthermore, human engineers are currently trying to build quantum computers. But to maintain quantum entanglement in a laboratory, physicists usually have to isolate particles in an ultra-high vacuum and freeze them down to near absolute zero using massive multi-million-dollar equipment.
Because quantum states are so incredibly fragile.
But the European robin is maintaining quantum entanglement inside a wet, warm, messy biological eyeball at room temperature while physically flapping its wings and flying through a rainstorm.
It's absurd when you put it like that.
It is. If human engineers can reverse engineer how the cryptochrome protein sustains that quantum coherence without freezing, it would trigger a technological revolution. We could develop bio-inspired, GPS-free navigation systems for autonomous drones, airplanes, or deep-sea submarines.
Systems that cannot be jammed, spoofed, or blocked by weather because they read the Earth's magnetic field at a quantum level. Yeah. We are literally looking to songbirds to teach us how to build the next generation of human technology.
It entirely reframes how we view the natural world. These seemingly simple animals are directly interacting with the fundamental subatomic forces of the universe in ways that our brightest physicists are really only just beginning to comprehend.
It's a profound realization.
We started this deep dive wondering how a tiny bird navigates from pole to pole, and we ended up dissecting quantum entanglement in the retina and mechanical iron switches in the ear. It's just wild.
It really is.
And it leaves me with one final lingering thought for you to consider. If a tiny songbird evolved to harness the bizarre, deeply complex rules of quantum mechanics just to figure out how to fly south for the winter, what other impossible quantum phenomena might be secretly operating inside our own human bodies, just waiting to be discovered?
Ooh, that is something to think about the next time you look up at the sky and see a flock passing by.
Definitely. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening, and keep wondering.
Take care, everyone.